I have the powers vested in me by the Homeowners Association. You will rebuild this immediately or face the consequences.
I knew the moment I killed the engine, and the total silence rushed in, a thick, suffocating, unnatural quiet that felt less like mountain air and more like a void. That something far worse than a simple property dispute had been executed here. I stepped out of the black Ford Bronco. The air didn't smell like pine or damp earth or anything natural. It smelled like pulverized gypsum and stale hydraulic fluid. The sound of my heavy leather boots crushing over splinters where the sprawling, two-tiered wraparound deck used to be. The deck I spent an entire, punishing summer building myself, board by honest board. That was the initial shockwave. Gone. Not just damaged, not condemned for a minor structural fault, but utterly, deliberately flattened into a fine, white, granular powder mixed with shattered stone. The only thing with any vertical presence was the rusted wrought iron mailbox post, leaning slightly, and yeah, my name, James D. Thorne, was still faintly visible on the side in that damn fading gold script. It was a macabre, mocking monument to an erased life. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, maybe 5 minutes, just breathing in the dust that used to be my living room. I'd moved up to Cedar Ridge Estates to escape the suffocating noise of the Capitol, the constant hum of manufactured crisis and political calculation. I wanted solitude, the right to fail or succeed on my own acreage. But the silence didn't bring peace. It brought a cold, hard, visceral fury. My heart wasn't hammering. It was doing that slow, methodical thudding you get when the initial, paralyzing shock finally gives way to pure, focused, terrifying resolve. The familiar, dangerous intellectual clarity, the lawyer's calm before the execution, settled over me. Then, inevitably, I heard it, that voice. High-pitched, perfectly nasal, and dripping with administrative self-importance, cutting through the silence like a dull saw. Well, if it isn't Mr. Above the Bylaws himself, finally returning to Cedar Ridge to survey the damage. I turned, slowly, giving myself time to settle my face into a mask of stone. There she was, Vicky Sterling, president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. 50-something, a severe woman with a helmet of aggressive blonde highlights, wearing a navy pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. She had that perpetual tight, smug smile she wore like a weaponized accessory. She clutched her ubiquitous clipboard, an instrument of petty tyranny, like a sword of suburban justice. "Vicky," I said, my voice barely a low rumble, controlled and unervingly quiet. "You did this. You deliberately leveled a house." She didn't flinch. She leaned into the moment, enjoying my visible devastation. "We issued multiple, repeated, certified warnings, JD." She clipped, flipping papers with theatrical efficiency. "You failed to remit over $9,000 in cumulative fines. These were not minor violations. They included unauthorized solar panel placement, which we specifically told you ruins the architectural harmony of the entire block, non-compliant landscaping height, and of course, the ongoing, infuriating issue of the oversized, politically divisive freedom flag. You demolished a federally registered primary residence, my home, over a flag and a few inches of grass." I stared at the sheer, mind-numbing absurdity, trying to find the genuine motive beneath the veneer of rules. She gave a dramatically slow, dismissive shrug, the ultimate expression of entitled indifference. "The flag was deemed political imagery against HOA decorum, violating the ban on permanent banners. We followed proper escalation procedures, as is our fiduciary duty to the community's collective aesthetic and property value proposition. The bylaws are clear." My fists were shaking with the effort of control, the effort of not grabbing that clipboard and snapping it over her knee. "Where is the demolition permit, Vicky?" "The legally binding one filed with the county. Planning Commission, signed off by the zoning board, not just signed off by your wine club caucus of 3 people. It was approved by the board." She clipped, emphasizing the word board, as if it were the Supreme Court. "Unanimous vote. You should have read the bylaws, JD. They explicitly state that fines, after a 6-month delinquency period, give the board the right to correct the violation by whatever means necessary, including demolition. You're not above the rules just because you own a big house and have a massive ego." She turned on her expensive leather heel. I watched her strut back toward her pristine, white BMW X5. I stood amidst the wreckage, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Too bad, Vicky. Too bad you never bothered to read the local papers closely enough. I was more than just a man with a big house and an ego. I was Governor James D. Thorne of this entire state, and Vicky Sterling, in her relentless pursuit of petty power, had just committed a major felony against the wrong man. This wouldn't be a homeowner suing an HOA. This was going to be the full, procedural, unbridled power of a state legal system unleashed on what I suspected was organized crime dressed in a pantsuit. I didn't head back to the Capitol. I needed ground intelligence and a local base. I booked the last cabin at the old Red Pine Lodge, which was mercifully disconnected from Wi-Fi and the constant political noise. The next morning, I was sitting across from Deputy Chief Marcus Cole, a man I respected for his lack of pretense. "You're telling me, Governor," Marcus said, rubbing his eyes, "that Vicky Sterling just illegally leveled the governor's personal residence? The state legislature is going to have my head for not catching this sooner." "I'm showing you, Chief," I said, sliding the folder. My team pulled the GIS data immediately. House standing Wednesday, gone Friday. No permits, no zoning approval. They filed fraudulent paperwork claiming it was an accessory structure, a shed, to bypass inspection. That is felony criminal misrepresentation and deliberate destruction of private property. I met his gaze, my prosecutor instincts fully engaged. "We treat this like a RICO case, Chief, not a simple property dispute. We look for the pattern, the conspiracy. The question isn't if they broke the law, but how many laws they broke, and who was paying them to do it. You want me to roll up there and make a scene? I want the contract, the company that signed off on the demolition, the subcontractor, the payment mechanism. Was it cash? A corporate wire? Follow that money, Chief. I guarantee it leads somewhere far more interesting than $9,000 in petty fines." Marcus nodded, a slow, grim understanding spreading across his face. He knew the difference between a nuisance and a clear criminal act. By noon, I was at the Cedar Ridge Community Pool House, my state ID badge clipped conspicuously to my shirt pocket. I had secured a specific court order forcing their closed-door HOA meeting to be public, citing pending federal and state investigations. The atmosphere outside was electric with whispered anxiety. When the door opened, Cheryl Evans, the secretary, stopped dead. She let out a small, terrified gasp, seeing the badge and connecting the dots. Vicky, at the head of the table, was visibly shaking beneath her professional veneer. "I wasn't aware we had guests, Mr. Powers," she attempted, her voice brittle. "You're aware now, Vicky," I replied, walking into the room in front of a dozen murmuring residents who had been too afraid to ever show up before. "This meeting is now public, by order of the court. We're already aware of your frivolous grievances," she interrupted, crossing her arms, desperately trying to project control. "Good. Then you're also aware that the structure you maliciously demolished was a state-registered primary residence. And the $9,000 in fines you cited were never formally invoiced via certified mail and never itemized with the required bylaw references, as state statute strictly requires for any enforcement action. Your entire legal premise is based on a deliberate, systemic failure to follow basic fiduciary protocol. We have internal, not anymore." I cut her off, my voice sharp and final. "As of this morning, under Emergency Executive Order 24 Alpha, an order I signed 2 hours ago, the state has frozen all Cedar Ridge HOA financial operations, pending a full criminal investigation into racketeering and financial fraud." Gasps erupted, louder than before. Vicky's face went white. She shrieked, "You can't do that. We're a private, non-profit entity. You have absolutely no jurisdiction over our governance." I handed her the paper with the state seal. "In cases of criminal fraud, systematic misrepresentation, or deliberate destruction of private property, all community governance bodies are subject to immediate legal audit and financial sequestration by the state treasury. And I've recused myself. The Attorney General's office is assigning an independent investigator. They won't care about the height of your hedges. Vicky, you're trying to ruin us." To make an example, Todd muttered, sweat pouring down his temples. "No, Todd. You did that when you hired a demolition crew using embezzled community improvement funds designated for the new playground equipment. Todd snapped. He leaped up, sending his chair skidding. I'm not going down for this, Vicky. You filled out the reimbursement forms. You told us it was for park maintenance. You've been skimming funds for months. I saw the receipts for those expensive imported patio heaters at your house, paid for with HOA money. You used the amenities fund like your personal slush fund for decorating. Enough, I said, cutting through Vicky's now hysterical denials. Deputy Chief Marcus Cole stepped in. Victoria Sterling, Todd Vance, you are both under arrest for misuse of community funds, criminal misrepresentation, and conspiracy to commit property destruction. I walked out, leaving the sound of Vicky's high-pitched, sobbing protests and handcuffs clicking behind me. The core of the malignancy had been excised. 3 days later, I was back in the dust, talking to the fire inspector, Darnell, who now approached me with a grave seriousness. Governor, this isn't what it looks like, Darnell told me. The demo crew was paid to tear it down, yes, but someone tampered with the structure beforehand. We found traces of a high-grade industrial solvent in the floorboards and foundation, the kind you use for heavy machinery degreasing, not what you'd find around a home. They wanted to make sure it couldn't be rebuilt, or that if the demo crew failed to level it, the whole damn thing would just burn to the ground, taking the evidence of the false permit claims with it. This was no longer just greed. This was calculated malice and attempted systemic fraud. Minutes later, Agent Naomi Vance from the AG's office arrived, carrying a thick binder and an air of quiet efficiency. Governor Thorne, the payment trail for the demolition led us through 3 different shell corporations, all tied back to the HOA's improvement fund. We've uncovered financial transfers totaling over $350,000 funneled out of Cedar Ridge over 2 years. The money wasn't just for Vicky's decorating budget. It was used to systematically buy properties at county auction after residents were hit with intentionally impossible, fabricated fines. They were driving people out, acquiring the land cheaply, so they could consolidate the entire ridge and flip it to a massive development firm, Apex Global. The scope of the crime was breathtaking. Cedar Ridge was not a community. It was a complex, slow-motion corporate land con. Vicky Sterling was just the hired help, the local muscle, Agent Vance confirmed. Apex Global had an agreement to purchase the entire acreage once the HOA secured 75% of the lots. They were within striking distance when you blew the lid off the operation. We need to bring the full weight of the federal system down on them, I stated, the adrenaline now replaced by cold determination. This pattern suggests organized crime. That afternoon, I called the town hall meeting. I spoke to the packed room, the retirees, the young families, the quiet ones who had suffered in silence. What was done to this community was criminal, systemic, and driven by pure, naked greed, I told them. But that ends now. The Cedar Ridge HOA has been formally dissolved. A provisional council of volunteer residents will take over. And every single fraudulent fine, every penny extorted, will be voided and refunded. The state is making the victims whole, not just with money, but with legal restitution and clear titles. The applause was overwhelming, a cathartic, unified roar of relief and righteous anger. I spent the next few weeks working with the state legislature, pushing hard for the Cedar Ridge Act, mandatory external audits, public access to all HOA records, and the creation of a powerful state ombudsman agency empowered to intervene proactively. It passed both houses unanimously. It was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. The mansion I lost never came back, but I started building a new, simpler one. George, the retired builder, led the volunteer crew. Every board was cut and sanded by a neighbor. This new structure was built with genuine community pride. A month later, Agent Vance called. We cracked the encrypted HOA server backups. We found the off-the-books audio recordings. The board discussing the demolition and the cover-up strategy. And the real key? A second file. Vicky talking to Silas Thorne. Silas Thorne, the corporate titan, the man behind the curtain of Apex Global. He promised Vicky a 7% commission on the Apex Global development deal if she secured the ridge. She sold out the entire community, her neighbors, for a side gig and a condo in Vail. I want a federal prosecutor on this now. This is a RICO case. Get the IRS involved. No man like Thorne reports that kind of side income honestly. 3 days after that, the FBI arrested Silas Thorne at a private airfield outside Aspen, attempting to flee to the Caribbean. I drove down to the county courthouse. Assistant D.A. Rachel Perez was ready to file a RICO charge and injunctions to reverse the fraudulent deeds. "We're going to get their land back, J.D.," she promised. "Every last square foot and every seized deed will be reversed." At the next community meeting, I sat at the back. Hank stood up, his voice solid. "I lost my wife's garden. They bulldozed it. But I'm here to say I'm planting something new. And I bet I'm not the only one." The unified applause that followed was the sound of a community truly healed. I walked out and found Agent Vance. "Thorne's arraignment is Monday. Vicky and Todd are turning state's evidence, naming all their partners in 3 different states. This is just the start of dismantling this national racket." "Funny thing about corruption," I said, looking up at the now peaceful ridge. "It's always loud, demanding, and self-important until people start paying real attention. Then, it gets real quiet, real fast. And the process of justice, though slow, is absolute." She smiled. "You ever think about making this official? Staying here full-time, Governor?" I looked at the simple, honest frame of the house I was building. I already did. The Capitol can manage without me for a while. This is where the real work is. Silas Thorne was sentenced to 20 years. His assets were liquidated into a massive restitution fund. Vicky, Todd, and Cheryl were banned from any governance position for life. The community rebuilt its trust. One snowy afternoon, a boy rode up to my new porch and handed me a folded, wrinkled piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn map of Cedar Ridge, complete with the lots, the trails, and the creek. In the corner, scrawled in crayon, he'd written, "Thanks for saving our town, J.D." I pinned that map above my workbench. They tried to take everything, my home, my privacy, the community's peace, but in the end, they gave us back something infinitely better. A reason to fight, a reason to stay, and a reason to believe that no matter how far corruption reaches, there is always a way, if you're willing to use the tools at hand, to cut it down root and branch. So, after hearing the whole story, a sitting governor using an emergency executive order to completely dismantle a massive criminal operation disguised as an HOA, did he overstep his executive authority? Was bypassing the traditional, slow civil process an abuse of power? Or was he right to go straight for the jugular, applying the full force of the law to achieve real, immediate justice for his neighbors? Let me know your take on J.D. Thorne's actions in the comments below. Was this necessary power or a dangerous precedent? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served.